brilliant study. This study, it's been making the rounds in sports science, and I'm yet to decide whether it's an interesting study or just a complete waste of time, but I'll leave that to you, okay? You can provide the verdict. So the study is called The Influence of if you've read this before, don't ruin the results. The influence of long-lasting static stretching on maximal strength, muscle thickness, and flexibility.
Have not, but it's super interesting.
Okay, so 52 subjects, split into two groups, intervention and control.
I reckon I know the outcome of this based on your views of stretching.
You probably do know the outcome. The intervention group wore a orthotic device. Okay, so it's this device you clip onto your foot. It stretches the gastrocs.
Mm-hmm.
So it puts your ankle into dorsiflexion. So you're stretching the plantar flexors, so your calf, soleus, gastroc. They wore it for an hour a day, 7 days a week for 6 weeks.
If this gives you bigger calves, sign me up. Sign me up.
We'll get to that. Okay. So they wore this device. So you basically apply it to your foot. You cinch it up to a level that gives you about an 8 out of 10 RPE.
In your sole of your shoe?
No, like barefoot in a device. You're at home.
Oh, you're not walking around.
You're not walking around. Okay. That would look very funny. But anyway, so they've got basically two chairs. They're sitting on one chair and they've been told to sit at basically like a 90 degrees, like an L.
Okay.
They're going to lift the one leg up, place it on the chair with the device on their foot.
How much dorsiflexion are we talking here?
The range differed as you went along.
Okay.
So they weren't told about degrees. They were just told cinch it to an 8 out of 10 discomfort level, which is pretty high, man. 8 out of 10 for an hour.
How long are you holding that? An hour?
An hour. So you got this thing on your leg for an hour at an 8 out of 10 and you're sitting with your foot on a...
So you have to keep coming into more dorsiflexion to maintain an 8 out of 10 because it would dissipate.
Correct. You keep... Well, that's a good question. I'll dig that up. But my understanding is for that session, you reach an 8 and then you leave it for the hour. And then the next session, that 8 might be a little bit more. You might get an extra few degrees of dorsiflexion because you've maybe gotten a bit more flexible. So anyway, they do this on only one leg. So they didn't want to do it on both legs so that you can use the individual as the control within the intervention group, if that makes sense. So the control group did nothing. And they looked at strength, so tested as a 1 RM plantar flexion on the leg press machine. So you know when you do like a calf raise on a leg press? So they did 1 RM strength, static and dynamic. So how much force can you push against a force plate without anything moving? And then the other one was actual like a repetition. And then they tested hypertrophy via like an ultrasound for the cross-sectional area of the gastrocs. And then the last thing they tested was range of motion or flexibility of that ankle joint with like a knee to wall test. Okay, so 3 outcomes. What do you think the results were? So strength. What would have happened to the stretched leg when they did the strength testing? Up or down?
Down.
Reckon they got weaker? Okay. So what actually happened, their isometric strength increased by 17% and their dynamic strength increased by 25%.
Wow.
Just remember, no resistance training protocol, only stretching, all right? And the non-stretched leg increased by 11% because you get that cross-education, which is quite known that if you train one limb, the other limb gets a little bit of that, the benefits because of the
well, in this
neural
case,
pathways.
if you stretch
correct.
one limb.
Right? So big increase in strength. Control group, either no improvements, like 0 or minus. They actually got worse. Okay? Range of motion, what would you think would happen there?
Yeah, increase.
Yeah, so they had a 13% increase in range of motion and a 27% increase in the angle of dorsiflexion. So it's like really significant increase.
Did range of motion increase in the control?
I'll tell you that right now. No, 2% increase. 2%, I think. And then so there was the cross education. And then what about, and this is the best part, the hypertrophy. What do you think?
Well, now I'm going to guess that they had increased hypertrophy.
15% increase in hypertrophy. Wearing a orthotic device that stretches your calf for an hour a day for 7 days a week over 6 weeks. 15%. They did no repetitions, They didn't lift anything.
So
they
how
didn't
do
cover.
you make sense of that as a stimulus?
So there's a few things, but going back to, I can't remember if it was our last episode or the one before. Remember we spoke about long versus short partials?
Mm-hmm.
So training a muscle in a lengthened position versus shortened position. The long partials, typically when you train a muscle in a stretched or a lengthened position, you get a bit more hypertrophy, especially distal hypertrophy, than if you do short partials. So the example in most of the studies are like a leg extension machine. The beginning of the range of motion where your leg is bent, that would be where your quads are at length. So if you only work in that small range of motion at the start of a leg extension versus the end of a leg extension when your leg is locked out. So the subjects that did the leg extension with long muscle lengths had a bit more hypertrophy. So it's something to do with this stretch-mediated hypertrophy. So independent of contracting the muscle, the stretch on the muscle is producing some kind of stimulus to make the muscle grow bigger and stronger. I don't understand muscle morphology and architecture enough to actually know exactly what it is, but like it could be something to do with fiber angles and pennation and
I wonder what would have happened if they had been training.
Yeah,
both groups were training.
That'd be interesting. I would still think. I reckon you would have. I'm completely extrapolating here, but my understanding is based off this, considering that their strength actually went up. Right after 6 weeks. Imagine if they were strength testing or strength training throughout those 6 weeks.
Yeah, now their volume goes up.
Right, they got more volume. They've also got this benefit of having that hour of stretching. So the way I see it is stretch volume. So how many hours a week of stretching you do for a muscle group can actually influence maybe the strength of the muscle.
1 hour a day.
Yeah, it's long.
It's impossible to do every muscle group.
No, you wouldn't. You would.
That's right.
Imagine you had a device on every muscle group.
From a protocol point of view,
right.
I'd also be interested in whether there's any differences in injury.
I don't think they didn't look at that, but that's a very good point because we've seen a lot of studies show that static stretching, which is exactly what this is, like long duration. I mean, this is ridiculously long duration. This is an hour, but even like 60 to 90 seconds of static stretching can reduce force output. So like you would not want to do this before.
Right immediately.
Before you're sprinting or running or training in the gym or something like that.
So what's the
application, right? What's the takeaway?
Yeah.
Well, anyone who has really skinny calves and is really desperate, go get an orthotic device, put it on for an hour a day, and you might get a little bit of growth in the calves.
Yeah.
I mean, look, that's the joke of this study is like, how do we apply this? Like, what can we really learn from this? So I would say for an athlete who's injured, perhaps, let's say they've got someone like you. Remember, you tore your calf when we were playing paddle. Ruined the game for everyone. We're all having a blast.
By the way, I'm back now, and the calf's great, and I'm playing better than ever.
Okay, prove it. I'd like to see that. I've got video evidence of me beating you. Remember, I posted that.
I'm actually undefeated these days.
No, you can't. You can't just say that. No evidence. Show me the evidence. Anyway, so if let's say you were injured, right, and you had trouble weight bearing or getting up or making it to a gym, and you were bedridden at home, which you were for a while when we were in Bali. Imagine if you chucked your orthotic device on the other leg.
Yeah, on the other one.
Yeah. You might get some cross-education to the injured leg. That's one way I could see it working.
Could be good in a hospital setting.
Hospital setting, people with type 2 diabetes who have like foot ulcers or conditions where they can't weight bear. I mean, use your imagination. But at this stage, it's very early on.
It might inform more studies that then bring a more practical kind of intervention.
True. And it might just inform the mechanism behind what drives hypertrophy when you're getting your muscle stretched. But then for all the yogis out there, because tell me if this happened to you. I've met guys and girls who I look at their body and I'm like, they definitely lift weights. And then I ask them what they're doing. They're like, I just yoga. And I'm like, how do you look so like well built? Like not like they have like sort of long stringy muscles, but like really good muscle bellies.
Defined.
Yeah, defined. And I'm thinking perhaps something to do with this stretch mediated hypertrophy. Could it be, affecting people who do yoga and other forms of stretching? It's just a theory.